Hello everyone. Welcome to the first lecture of the network security course. This is in a many ways the continuation of the previous security course that you have done, Principles of Computer Security. But in this course, we will be mainly focusing on security aspects relevant to various things net concerning to networks. So this is in today's lecture is going to be mainly an introduction to the course and why are we doing this course and what are some of the things that we'll be covering in the coming weeks. And in the coming weeks we'll be going through various topic areas that are relevant to network security, and we may also engage in some practical activities, some case studies, and also some tutorials. All of those details will be shared to you through the LMS. And other than that, let's get on with today's discussion. So, to start with, let's think about what is the situation around cybersecurity these days. And we hear about cybersecurity a lot, we hear about computer security a lot, information security, and all these terms are thrown around a lot. And one of the reasons is the threats of cybersecurity attacks, the occurrence of cybersecurity incidents is increasing significantly and has increased significantly over the last decade or so. And with the use of more and more online based services, interconnected, network connected services, and computer systems that are always connected to the internet, connected to other wide area networks, local area networks, and so on, the potential for security threats coming through the networks has also significantly increased. So, for example, what you can see in this slide is a large number of incidents or large number of significant incidents that have only happened in the last sort of 2 months or 3 months. And what you can see is it is the target of such attacks is not just individuals, not just governments, not just private organizations, it's all of the above. And different people get targeted for different reasons. For example, a government may be targeted by another government for political reasons, for geopolitical reasons. An individual may be targeted by another person for scamming purposes, stealing information. So there could be many reasons why these cyber attacks are launched. And given the connectivity of devices, given the interconnectedness of our computing capabilities, many of these attacks are coming through networking capabilities. So that is the context in which we are going to be focusing on in this particular course. One of the other things that we can see here is how such attacks are being perpetrated. So, for example, if we think about a computing system in the 80s, for example, these were not very highly capable computers, but any sort of security attack or anyone who is able to do things like that had a fairly high level of knowledge, high level of understanding of systems, because not many people were familiar with these computing systems. So only the few who had a lot of knowledge were able to launch these type of cybersecurity attacks or computer-based security attacks. But as time progressed, what happened is the nature of security attacks and the complexity of such attacks increased. For example, the basic form of security attack started with sort of password guessing, simpler form of attack. But later on, we had like various other sort of exploiting various software vulnerabilities, identifying network-based packet tracing or packet sniffing, denial of service attacks. So various types of attacks, and the sophistication of these attacks has sort of significantly increased over the period of time. So as we went along, the significance or the complexity of the attacks increased. But at the same time, another thing that happened, which is over time, there were many tools that were developed, there were many capabilities that were developed to help someone launch these attacks. Now, what we did not need is people with, say, higher level of knowledge were no longer needed, and they didn't have to know a lot about how these attacks work. As long as they had access to these systems, they were able to launch these attacks. The recent times, the attackers didn't need to have a lot of high level of sophisticated knowledge. Only they needed is access to information, access to information about vulnerabilities, access to information about backdoors, access to information about other issues with the computer systems, and then they were able to launch these attacks by using tool sets, using various rootkits, and various other things were used in this manner. So this is also another thing that we need to remember in terms of what is the landscape that we are operating in from. So we are having much more complex computer systems, much more interconnected computer systems, much more sophisticated software systems, but at the same time, we don't need significantly complicated or significantly talented or an individual to launch these attacks. They are the computer security industry on the other side, where we can say if we are we are thinking about protecting systems, people who are launching these attacks have much more resources as well at their disposal, so they are able to launch attacks much efficiently as well. So that is the landscape that we are in when we are thinking about network security, internet security these days. Then, when we think about computer security, this is something that you would know already from your previous courses. The basic three elements of computer security, the basic three pillars of computer security, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when we say computer security, we are talking about how these can be ensured for information and systems that are there in a computing environment. So when we talk about integrity, availability, and or confidentiality of information that are stored in these computer systems that are being used or communicated through these computer systems, that is what we expect in terms of our basic security requirement. So here, when we say confidentiality, it is about preserving access to information, or if there is a piece of information, we want to make sure only the personnel who are allowed to access that information are allowed access. So the confidentiality is about who can see the information, and only they are allowed to see the information. Integrity is about what is the nature of the information and who can change the information. If somebody is not able to change not allowed to change the information, then they should not be able to change. So we should be able to trust the information as long as the integrity of it is being preserved. Then availability is about the necessary information is available in a timely manner, and also the access to that information can be made in a more reliable manner. So those are the three requirements that we would have in terms of the basic security requirements. So for example, when we think about confidentiality, we can think about, say, if you have some mark sheets that you have obtained all your grades from your university, so then that is an information that you may want to keep confidential. You may not want to disclose that to anyone in a public manner. So you may want to show that to maybe few select people that you are selecting. You may want that to be visible to some teachers for some reason. So you may control who can see that. Then anyone else who is using the computer system, anyone else who is using the same computer application, for example, should not be able to view the information that you have protected with certain confidentiality. Then integrity is about say the same said mark sheet, for example, that is being maintained by the university should be kept in a integrity. The integrity of that information should be maintained, so that nobody else should be able to modify those results other than those who are normally allowed to. Say, for example, a teacher can change the marks, whereas a student should not be able to change their marks. So that is about the integrity of that information. Then availability is about that particular requested information is readily available when it is needed. For example, if the information is needed for a particular purpose, and at that particular point in time, if the information cannot be accessed anymore, say for example that server is no longer accessible, the network is not functioning properly, then that would also be a problem for us. So then that is about the availability. So availability is we are able to access the information when we need to access it. In this context, we can also think about how we can prevent these things, or what are the alternatives or mitigations that we can have to preserve the computer security in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So there are few concepts that we can think about in this context. One is the security attack. So the security attack is the form of any action that is going to compromise the information. So anything that can compromise the confidentiality, the integrity, or the availability of the information, we will call that a security attack. Any action that can be classified under that. Then what we have is security mechanisms. These are any process or any other measure that is designed to either detect, prevent, or recover from such security attacks. So we will have security attacks. Those are the problems that we have. Those are the vulnerabilities those are the problems that can occur in the system. Then what we have is the security mechanisms. So security mechanisms are anything that can be used to detect an attack, for example, or prevent an attack, or once an attack has happened, that can be used to recover from that attack. For example, if somebody is accessing an information without permission, if we can detect that, that is a security measure. If we can stop that from happening, that can be a security measure. Or if somebody has made unauthorized changes to a file, and if we can recover to the previous version of the file, then that could also be considered a security measure. But one of the things that we will come across is many of the information systems, many of the computer systems will not be and cannot be protected by a single security measure, because they would be prone to many different security attacks from many different angles, and we may have to think about different security measures to protect from each of these things. So then security services is what we would do as a collection of security measures for particular types of security attacks. So when we implement certain security measures with a particular plan, that we would call as a security service. So a security service would be something that we would do as part of a collection of security measures to counter a particular security attack. So it can be a single security measure or a single security mechanism, or it could be a number of different security mechanisms that can be combined together into a security service. Then when we are talking about security attacks, there may be a terminology, an ambiguity related terminology that we may use, that is threats and attacks. So in many ways what we may do is we may use these two terminologies, threats and attacks, more interchangeably. So what we may do is we may use these two terms in one another's place, but in the reality is there is a slight difference in terms of what those terms may mean. For example, threat is a terminology that we would mainly use to say what is a potential for a security violation. So if there is a security violation that can happen, and if there is a particular reason why that can happen, is what we would say is a security threat. On the other hand, a security attack is actually a particular violation that is happening or that has happened. Say, for example, having a bad password is a security threat, but somebody guessing your password and logging into a system is the security attack. So that is the main difference. Threat is a potential for a violation, an attack is an actual violation happening. But in many conversations, even during this course, even I may sometimes use these terminologies interchangeably time to time, because that is fairly happening in the sort of regular conversation. But as sort of theoretically or sort of fundamentally, there is a slight difference between these two terminologies. Then, when we think about network security and network based security attacks, we can think about four main categories of security attacks. It can also apply to any type of security attacks. So, what we would start with is the normal flow of information. So, what we may have is we may have a information source, and we may have a destination to where that information needs to go to, and that information is traveling from the source to the destination. So that is the normal flow of information that we expect from a system. But what can sometimes happen is there can be different types of security attacks. The first one is what is called interruption. So interruption is about attack on availability. So for example, if this particular user needs to access the information, but when the information is being transmitted, it is stopped midway through. So then that particular user who needs the information is no longer able to access the information. So that is interruption. It is an attack on availability. Then another attack that can happen is, so you are requesting the information and the information is being transmitted to the receiving party or the destination. So they are getting the information. But the problem is that information is also being intercepted and also being received by another third party, which is normally allowed, or who is not normally authorized to receive that information. So then in that case, what we have is an assault or an attack on confidentiality. Then another type of attack that can happen is about modification. So here what would happen is the information is requested by a party, and then that is being sent by the source, but in between it is being received by a third party, and they may modify or do something with that information and then forward it onwards. So here what happens is, here the integrity of the information is being violated. So this is modification is an attack on integrity. Then another type of attack that can happen, again somewhat similar to modification, but the main thing is here it is not at all coming from the source. So what we have here is, we may have some information that may be requested by the receiver, but the information is, the request never went to the source, so source didn't even know that information was requested. The third party is the one actually sending the information. So here the problem is the authenticity of the information. So we don't know from whom it is coming, and we may by mistake assume it is coming from the correct party there. Say for example, an attack or interruption attack or an availability based attack is if somebody is launching a DDoS attack or a denial of service attack, and they can stop any information being transmitted to the third party. If they can stop it in between, then the availability is compromised. So that is a key security requirement, and that is compromised. If it is about interception, say for example, if I am receiving some information from a server, I'm downloading a file or downloading my mark sheets, for example. If another user who is monitoring the network, if they can sniff the packets and piece out the information that you are accessing from there, then that is about interception. If somebody can place a intermediary relay server in between you and the third party, and all the requests are coming to you and they are onwards requesting from the third party, and whatever information is being received they modify and send you a modified version. So that could be an attack on integrity. And fabrication is you are requesting something, it is not going to the actual server at all, at actual service at all, it is going to a fake service. For example, it's going to someone who has created a scam, for example. You may think you are accessing a particular company, but you are not. You're accessing some other website that is trying to steal some information or send some malware or something like that. So there could be another purpose for that particular attack. So that is about the authenticity of the information. Then when we think about security threats and security attacks, we can categorize them into broadly two main categories. One is called the passive threats and the other one is called the active threats. So with passive threats, the main feature that we would see there is the end user will not be aware of those things happening or will not be directly affected by that thing happening. Say, for example, if somebody is monitoring your network traffic and if they are just monitoring it, it is not going to affect what you are actually receiving. So that would be a passive attack. But whereas if somebody is sitting in the middle and modifying the information and forwarding it to you, then that is an active attack because that is affecting what you are communicating, what is the information that you are receiving. So those are mainly two categories of threats that we can group them to: passive threats and active threats. So for example, in the case of a passive attack, an example could be, say, if Bob is communicating with Alice, for example. So Bob is trying to send some information to Alice and that communication is happening without any issue. But at the same time, there's another person, another third party sitting in between and they are monitoring the information. So it is a problem for confidentiality, but that doesn't mean the message that is being sent from Bob to Alice is still being received. The only issue is a third party is receiving a copy of the information. So it is not impacting on what Alice and Bob are communicating between them, but it is still an issue for confidentiality. Similarly, it may not be the information that they are receiving. Say, for example, sometimes you may use a encrypted channel, so the actual information may not be visible, but the fact that you are communicating to a particular server may still be a valid thing. Say, for example, you may be connected to Alice through a encrypted channel, but if somebody is monitoring your network traffic, they may still be able to observe that you are communicating through a particular application or particular system. They may see this is the amount of period that these two people were connected or these two entities were connected, and that information itself can be sometimes problematic. So again, it is not impacting on the actual communication happening between Bob and Alice. So Bob and Alice are still going to receive and send all the information that they have, but it is going to be any other information about their communication is going to be monitored by the third party, and that may be a problem sometimes. Then when we think about active attacks are where the actual communication that is happening is actually being impacted. So the first type of active attack is masquerading. So here what happens is Bob is actually not even involved in this communication, but this third party may pretend and say they are Bob. They may say they are Bob and they may try to make a connection with Alice. They may be sending some information saying, I am Bob, and they may communicate with them. That could be a problem. Another way that can happen is a replay attack. Here what can happen is whatever the information that is being sent from Bob is being received by the third party, and they may again send that back to Alice. But here there's no direct communication is being impacted. All the communication is going through the third party. So again, that could be a problem because the third party is actively participating in the communication, and sometimes they can do anything else with that communication as well. So one of the other things that they may do in such situation is about modification of messages. So here what happens is Bob is sending the information. So the third party is actually modifying the information and sending something else to Alice. So whatever now Alice is receiving is not coming from Bob directly. They are receiving something totally different, something totally wrong. Then another type of active attack is denial of service attack. So here what happens is this third party is sending too many requests to the server such that the server is no longer able to accept any more requests. So now when Bob tries to connect to the server, they are not able to connect because this person is sending too many requests and created a denial of service attack. So the service is no longer available. So that is also something we could consider as a active attack. Then when we think about security services, so we have those different types of attacks, passive attacks, active attacks, different types of security attacks. Now when we think about security services that we can have to mitigate those attacks or counter those attacks, we can again categorize them into a number of main or major categories. So these are some of the different security services that we may commonly use as part of our security implementation. So whenever we identify a particular security threat or potential for a security attack, then we may implement a combination of these security services to counter that problem. So the first one is about authentication. So authentication is mainly it is about making sure that when a user is saying that they are who they are, it is about ensuring what they are saying is correct. So it is about ensuring who created or who sent a piece of data. It is about the question that we are trying to answer here is about who. Who is the user that is saying this? Say if I go to a computer system and if I say I am Nimal, and how does the computer system can make sure that I am actually Nimal? So this is where we may use different authentication mechanisms like passwords and biometrics and so on. So all these security mechanisms, all these authentication mechanisms will be used as part of authentication services. Then the next service that we may use is what we call access control. So access control is all about who can use a particular system or service. So, and say authentication is about making sure who a particular person is, and access control is about what they can do. Say for example, if I go into the LMS and say I am Nimal, LMS will make sure checking my email and password, authenticate me and let me log into the system. Then the system has to access control and say whether I am a teacher and I am allowed to access student information, or I am a student and I can only access course information. So based on the different users, they may be able to do different things. They may be able to access different things in the system, and controlling that, the service that is going to control that is what we call as access control or authorization. Then another service that we may commonly use is what is called about data confidentiality. So this is about preserving data confidentiality. So for example, we may use in a computer system, we may say this file is only accessible by this particular set of users. Then we may it would be about making sure that only those users are able to access that information. Then we may have data integrity, that is about that data is not modified without the permission or without anyone who is being allowed to modify it. Say, for example, if I send an email to someone, they should receive it as it is without anything being modified in that email. Then another thing that we may come across is what is called non-repudiation. So non-repudiation is about, if I send an email, then I should not be able to say, no, I did not send an email. If it is actually from me, then there should be a way to verify that. If it is not actually from me, then again, there should be a way to verify that. If it is actually from me, then I should not be able to say it is not from me. So there should be a way to making sure that any action that is performed by a particular user in a system is not, they cannot dispute that. Then the last one is about availability. So that is about protecting the availability requirement of the system. So the system is anytime available. So any security services targeted towards that, we will classify them under that. So with these different security security services, so we have for the various security services, we may use a number of different security mechanisms. So the security mechanisms are the actual security measures that we take, the actual implementations that we do, and we may do various different things to do that. Say, for example, for authentication purposes, we may use digital signatures, authentication exchanges, for example. For access control purposes, we may use access control systems. For data integrity purposes, again, we may use digital signatures. So different technologies, different mechanisms may be used to achieve different services. So there will be attacks, and to counter attacks, we will have various security services, and these security services will be built using various security mechanisms. So that is the main relationship between security services and security mechanisms. So security services are the overarching thing that we are doing, and the security mechanisms would be the underlying implementations that we would be doing, so to speak. So let's think about network security particularly, or even like general cyber security, and think of an example that is not at all related to cyber security, not at all related to computers at all, but an example to better understand what we are trying to do. So let's think about the security threats that would have been faced by a village merchant, say 100 years ago. So say 100 years ago, before the times of computers and all these things, there is a village merchant, someone selling some things at a village. They may have a shop, or they may be selling from their house, but that is what they are doing. So for that village merchant, what are some of the security threats that they may have? So one of the main things is somebody may come and steal the things. So stealing their property is the main threat that they would face, the main security threat they would face, other than like natural disasters and so on. Leaving that, thieves or stealing would be the main security threat that they would face. Then when we think about what they can do about it, what are some of the security mechanisms that they can have? So they may want to protect the perimeter. So they may want to protect the walls and doors and gates and everything. They may want to put some locks to the gates. They may want to put some locks to the doors, and windows are locked and all these things. So that is the security mechanism that they may want to implement. Then another way the threats can happen is people can actually come into the space because they would need to. Say if you are a merchant, if you are selling something, people would actually come into the premises to buy things. So if they have a legitimate purpose to come into the place normally. So if you have customers, then customers would have to come. So if it is a new customer, it is not somebody that you know, but you still need to allow them to come into your shop, or come into your business entity. So then in that case, do you suspect them or do you don't suspect them? If you suspect them, suspect everyone who is coming and checking if they are a thief, then they may not come in because it is too much of a problem for them. If you don't suspect anybody and assume everybody is going to be safe, people are going to come and steal things and go away. So then you need to have a way to identify certain customers and trust them, and then identify certain other people and not trusting them. So this is something that we may do in a sort of a simple village merchant, somebody having a simple shop in a village. We may do these type of things when we think about security, security threats, and security mechanisms. These are some of the things that we may do in that environment or in that situation. The same type of thing would also apply to computer security, to network security. So if somebody is trying to access your service, for example, through the network, again, you will have to think about all the similar things. You may have to have a periphery, a perimeter. You may want to protect certain computer resources. They are inside that perimeter. Then you may have to have certain gates, firewalls, some mechanisms to let some people in, block other people, identifying or differentiating between users, who is a real customer, who is a threat, differentiating between them. So all these things are again applicable in the computer world, computer networking world as well. Say for example, in an analogy that we may use very commonly in networking, in network security world, is about the same example that we previously mentioned, that is Alice is someone who is trying to communicate with Bob, and those two want to communicate perfectly, but then we may have another entity in between that is trying to steal information, intercept information, modify information. So they are the threat that we have. So anything that we want to send, we may want to send them from here to here. So that is what, or the vice versa. But the problem is if somebody can see the information in between here. So that is what we want to try and prevent. So the basics that we may think from our real world story of somebody who is having a shop and trying to protect the properties inside the shop, the same things would also apply in network communication, but just things are different. So now the computers and the information is the property that you are trying to protect. People can come through the network, that is the gates that you want to protect, and what are the different mechanisms you can have in protecting that. So that is the main focus, or that is the main thing that we will be mainly thinking about throughout this course. So with that in mind, we have a very basic model for network security. So this is something that we would revisit quite often. You may have also covered this previously when you were studying the basics of computer security, this network security model. So what we have here is, we would start with a sender. So the sender is someone who is trying to send some information. So they have a message that they need to send, and they need to send that to a particular recipient. So they need to send that particular information to the recipient. So now what they have is, they would have a particular mechanism, particular way to change that information into a secure message. So we don't want to send the message as it is. We want to convert that into a secure message and send that across. So to do that, we may have some security transformational functions. So things like encryption is an example of what we may do here. We may use some secret information and convert it into a secret message. So then that secret message is what is being communicated through our information channel. Say if we are sending an email, we would only send that secret message through our email, and that secret message will be received by the recipient. So now what the recipient has to do is they have to somehow understand the same uh, security information or understanding of how that secure message was created, and they may have to do the reverse of that same transformation. Whatever the security transformation done was done at the sender point, they may have to repeat that at the receiver end and create the same message here. So they can recreate the message here as long as they can understand how to recreate that. So that is the very basic model of network security that we would have. So basic model for network communications or securing network communication, sending something from one end to the other. Again, this is something that we would be mainly revisiting a lot when we are talking about implementing various security mechanisms, various communication security mechanisms, various network security protocols. In all of these, this basic understanding of communication would be something that we will be trying to do. The main point that we would need to ensure here is anyone who is trying to attack the communication, any opponent that is trying to get through to the information, when they intercept things from the information channel, they are only able to see the secure message or the encrypted message is the only thing that they can see. They should not be able to see the plain text or the readily accessible information. So that is what we try to do here. Then, when we think about threats broadly, security attacks broadly, even when we are thinking about network based attacks or anything else, there are few questions that we should ask to understand the nature of a threat properly. So, that is, how did someone know that they can do this? So, did they have some inside information? How did they know that particular vulnerability is there? Say, for example, if we go back to the village merchant example, if somebody knows that this lock can be opened by a particular type of a key, then how did they know that? How did they get access to that key or that information? So, that is the first question. How does someone come up with a way to threaten the security? The second question is, why does someone come up with the way to threaten the security? Why did they think about that? Is it because they have a personal issue with the organization? Did an employee was fired? Did they not get enough salary? Are they getting more money from a third party to do this thing? Are they doing this thing to steal money? So are there any financial gains, political gains, so any other gains? So the question about why someone is doing something. Then the third question is, which parts of the organization are at risk because of an attack? If somebody can steal a particular piece of information from an organization, who are the people who would be affected? Would it affect the whole organization, the business, or would it affect only a small part of the organization? Would it reveal all the business secrets and competitors will get a lot of advantage out of it? Will it reveal a lot of customer information and then customers will no longer willing to do business with that organization? So who will be affected if that attack happens? If there's a particular threat and if that threat is being realized, who will be affected by it? Which parts of the organization will be affected by it? Then the other fourth and most important question when we are particularly thinking about network security and computer security, that is, what are the actual physical boundaries for the assets of an organization? Say, for example, we take a private organization, for example, let's take a bank, let's say. So, if it is a bank, the bank may have certain physical premises which belongs to the bank and where they do business from. But that doesn't mean all their information is also actually inside those same places. Sometimes banks or any other organizations may also store their information in other places, like a data center, like sometimes a cloud service provider. There could be various other places where these information assets can be. Sometimes maybe Some of the information may be even in a device. Say, for example, you are working for an organization, you are working on some of the confidential documents of that organization. You are typing some new tender documents, new sales documents on your own laptop or on your work laptop, and you travel with your laptop to home and you are working from home. Now, what happens is the actual asset or the information asset, the physical boundary of the information asset is no longer that organization. Now it is also at your home. It was also at your transport. Say you were traveling on bus or train or anything, again it was there. You went on your way home, you went to a shop, now that information was there. If somebody can steal the laptop on your way, again, so that is a problem there. So we should have a better understanding of what is the physical boundary of the information that we have, particularly with the use of cloud computing. With a lot of network connected capabilities, people tend to work from home, people tend to work from different offices. So all these things create a potential for information to be at other places than that we can control effectively. So then that is also something we have to think about, where the attack can happen, because not always the attack is going to happen in the inside of the internal network. Sometimes it may also happen externally. So whatever the internal network security you have or the firewalls you have may not be good enough if somebody is taking the organizational files in their computer at home and something happens there. So those are also some things that we have to understand to understand the whole context or the whole picture of the landscape. Then another thing that we can think when we are thinking about attacks is, again, attacks are not going to happen just as it is. It's not somebody is going to not just launch an attack without any preparation. So attacks would normally happen in a number of phases. So the first one is about somebody is going to come into your organization or come into the network, or they are going to gather information. So they are going to do reconnaissance activities. So they are going to learn about your organization. They may talk to some insiders to get some insider information. They may try to prod your network capabilities. They may try to ping your networks, various ports. They may try to see, are there any vulnerabilities in those, what are the systems being used. So they may do some things like that. Then they may do what is called scanning. So that is where they are going to scan all the ports, scan all the network activities and all these things, and try to get a better picture of what are the things that is happening inside the organization. Then by scanning, they will identify certain vulnerabilities and they would use those vulnerabilities to gain access into the system. Then once they gain access, they would try to, depending on the nature of the attack they are launching, say if they're launching a passive attack, they may try to be as long as possible and try to steal information. If they are launching an active attack, they may try to still maintain as much as possible, as long as possible, even after they have been detected. So they may want to avoid being detected and continue the attack as long as possible. So that is maintenance of attack. And if they are not being detected, then they may want to cover their tracks and leave. So they may come into the organization through the networks, into the systems. They may steal some information, and if possible, they will erase all the evidence of them coming in and leave. So then that is also an even bigger problem. So it doesn't mean all of these things are going to happen in all the types of attacks that we have. Some of these may happen, some of these may not happen, but mainly these are some of the common stages that may be happening in a typical network attack or computer security attack. Then when we think about the methods of defense that we have for these type of problems, these type of threats, these type of attacks, one of the main solutions or one of the main defenses that we would have is cryptography. So this is where we use encryption This is where we use message authentication mechanisms. Various protocols may be used there. Signatures and certificates, digital signatures and digital certificates. So these are some of the measures based on cryptography that we may use as part of our security measures, as part of our defense. So that is one of the main things that we would do. And as part of this course also, we will discuss about a number of these approaches, particularly concerning to network security. Then other than that, we may have certain software-based controls like access limitations, various things at operating systems levels as well. Certain hardware-based controls. We may have certain policies, but say for example, it may be about password policies, maybe about who can connect to the office network, for example. Can you connect your personal device to the office network, or your personal phone, mobile phone or laptop, can it be connected to the office Wi-Fi? So these are some of the policies that we may have depending on our security requirements and as part of our defense mechanism. Then other than this, one of the main things that that gets forgotten a lot when we are talking about cyber security, network security, is about the requirement to do the physical security. So however much you try to protect your information by all the cyber security means, unless you have proper physical security, that is still a vulnerable situation. So you may have the best firewalls for the system, you may have the best computer intrusion detection systems and so on, but still if you don't have proper physical security, people may just walk in, jump through the fences, break the doors and come into the organization and steal some information there directly. So again, that physical security aspect and having physical controls would be an important aspect of the overall defense mechanisms that we can have. Then there's another thing that we'll have to think about when we are thinking about security, network security, and cyber security in general. That is how much security we want and how much it is going to affect the ease of use. Say, for example, we can ask for a password and scanning a biometrics fingerprint and maybe sending other codes, one-time passwords and codes, and having them inputted. All these things, we can build a combination of these things as part of a security mechanism. But if that is going to impact on the ease of use of a system, if, for example, if somebody needs to come into a website, they need to do a lot of checks and all to make sure that they are a valid customer. Sometimes they may not come in, they may like, okay, that's too difficult to do this, and they may not continue doing that. So again, if it is too difficult, people may not like it. But if we make it too hard for the purpose of security, then that is also a problem. So we have to strike a balance between security and ease of use. Then also another thing that we should remember is, just because we do obscurity or we hide something, that doesn't mean it is secure. So it just means it is hidden. Say for example, if you think like some of the employees don't know how a system works, that may be good, but that doesn't mean you are perfectly secure. Just because you are obscuring something, you are hiding something, it doesn't mean it is a security mechanism. So just because you want full security, you make it difficult, you hide things and all these things, and that is impacting on the ease of use of the system. That doesn't mean it is going to solve your problem. It is just going to make things more difficult for you, but at the end of the day, it may not solve the security problem that we have. Particularly when you're thinking about cost and the level of security that we need, we may find ourselves in this situation. That is, we can either have no security, or we can have full security. We can have all the security measures that we can have. But at the other hand, when we want to have no security, that means there's no cost to that. But if you want to have a lot of security, the cost will exponentially increase. At the same time, in terms of threats and the impact of threats, if we don't have any security mechanisms, we will have very significant impact from our security, for our information security. If we have more and more security inbuilt, we will not have many threats. But either of these ends, either of the ends of these spectrums are not great places to be, because if we don't have any security mechanisms built in, if we don't have anything here, it is not costly, we are not spending any money, but a lot of security attacks may be affecting us, and that may cost us a lot of money in turn. So it is still a problem. If we try to spend a lot of money to implement a proper fully secure system, then that may be too much expensive, that may be unrealistically expensive. So what we may have to do is we may have to find a middle ground where both of these things are balanced. So again, that is something that we have to think about. Not the greatest security solution is what we need. We want a security solution that is suitable for a particular environment, that is necessary for a particular environment. One of the basic types of security mechanisms that we would do, particularly in terms of network security or even any other computer security, cyber security, is about who to permit and who to deny. So that is identifying what are the entry points to an organization, what are the entry points to the network to the organization. So can they connect from the internet? Are there any services that are connected to the internet? Can any user come through that? Are there any Wi-Fi networks people can come through that? Are there any wired networks? Can they patch into that and come into the network, organization network? Are there users who are working from home and can somebody get into the network through them? So identifying what are the entry points would be a key thing. So thinking about physical entry points or network entry points. Then identifying what information should be available to someone. Say if somebody connects to the network, connects to the organization network, what are the things they should be able to access? Can they only connect to the internet? Can they connect to the internal servers? Can they connect to the financial servers? Are only financial department people able to access financial servers, or can sales people also access financial servers? So these are some of the policies, some of the decisions that we may have to think about. Then another aspect that we seriously need to think about, particularly increasing these days, about network security and cyber security, is about social engineering. So that is, say for example, somebody calls you from, you get a call on your phone and they say, I am calling from your bank and we have detected some suspicious activity on your credit card. Can I confirm some details with you? So that is what they are saying. And they are saying, if you can confirm those details, they can block that activity, block that charge on your card, so your card is not being used in an unintentional manner. So now the question is, do you trust them or do you don't trust them? If you think they are a scam caller, then you ignore the call, but they are actually from the bank and they were trying to stop a transaction that you didn't perform, that is a problem. If they are not from the bank and you give some information to them and then they use that information onwards and do something else, that could also be a problem. So the social engineering based security threats, whatever the technical solutions that we may build, firewalls and network monitoring and network access control and intrusion detection systems, however many things that we can implement, all of these things are not going to protect us unless we have people who are able to protect or work with that system. So that social engineering aspect is also important. We will discuss some of these also later in this course. So we are going to be in a situation, the world is going to be in a situation, the cyber security environment, the network connected computers are all these considered as security practitioners, as technical people who are going to be working in this environment. We are going to be in a situation of what we can categorize as an arms race, because we need to be up to date with new scams and new threats because there are new vulnerabilities going to be found. So we can't say I know everything that was happening in 2020, because in 2022 totally different things are going to happen. So we need to know who we can trust, what is the trustable source. For example, if we are updating software updates, where should we get the updates from? Can we trust a software update? Can it be actually a security threat that is coming masquerading as a security update? So all these things we have to be at it. We have to have a better understanding of these things, better understanding of security threats. So that is why we would cover a number of these concepts as part of this course, but a number of fundamentals as part of this course. But we will also briefly visit some case studies, discuss about some case studies, and have some discussions about what is happening around us in the real world. And that would give you an idea about how you can keep on improving yourself in terms of your understanding of security, understanding of cyber security threats, and the various countermeasures and things that you can do to prevent those attacks from happening. So that is what we would be intending to do as part of this course. So as a final activity for you all for this week, I would urge you all to do this particular tutorial, and I would post an activity on LMS where you can submit this later as well. So what I'm expecting you to do is make a list of everything that you have online. So all your digital footprint, not only online, but even considering all your hard drives and computers and phones and so on. So think about all your photos, documents, anything that you have created digitally, online and offline, and think about where those things are. You may have an old email account where some of your personal data may be. You may have additional social media accounts where you may have posted photos that you no longer use. You may have old computers, hard drives, phones where you may have some personal information. So think about all those things. Think about who has access to those information. Think about who can steal those information, and think about a plan how you can protect such a scenario, protect your information in such scenarios. So that is the brief tutorial activity for you all to think about from your personal perspective. So that is a brief introduction into the course network security. We mainly sort of revisited many concepts about basic computer security that you may have covered previously. And from the coming week, we'll go into more detailed topics specific to network security. We'll talk about network access controls, cloud security, internet security, and so on. So we will revisit those, we will go into those different topics, and also we will have certain case studies and tutorials to discuss about what are some of the recent attacks and recent cybersecurity threats and so on. We will do those as well. And as always, the main mode of communication would be through LMS, and you can always email me or send me a message through any messagings that we normally use. And if you have any clarifications, doubts, please feel free to let me know. So until next time, thank you for joining in this lesson. Hope to see you at the next week's lesson. Thanks. Bye.